awakening for self-development, something which we all need, something which we all look forward to, and something which we all see in our day-to-day life as a basic requirement. It's my honor and privilege to have with us Professor Kukreja. He's an esteemed scientist and in physics, and he is here with us for Vanguard lecture, and I'm so happy that he has already also agreed for delivering the talk on the topic. He runs an NGO which works on this area, and he's well-known motivational speaker also. So I welcome you, sir, and thank you for accepting to be with us.
So, thank you very much for organizing this meeting. Today, I am not here to preach you or tell you this or do that and rest of it. Rather, I have come here to discuss a subject with you as a student, as a seeker, that how do we awaken for self-development? So the approach is that. Approach is not to give you some huge wisdom or some sermons or mantras, not like that. Okay? So together we are discussing a subject today, and as you can see in this subject, we can break it into small parts. First question that we should ask ourselves, what is self? Do we understand what is self? Or what do we mean by self? Then second question we should ask is, what is self-development? And finally we should answer a question, how to awaken for it. Okay? This way we will try to generate more clarity for the speaker and also for all of you. And the approach here is to share and develop this knowledge through experiences. You have experienced your life, I have also experienced my life as a scientist in Department of Atomic Energy, as a person, as a guide for PhD students. So these experiences we will share with each other and try to see what we are discussing. Is it phenomenologically correct? Is it plausible or not? If not, please tell me, and feel free to share your experience. Try to see if what I am telling applies to you or not, so that eventually we learn how to awaken ourselves for self-development. So with this introduction, let us come to the first question. What is self? When we talk of self, if someone asks me, what are you? Okay, I would say, yes, my name is this, I have some physical things with me, my own body, for example. This is also part of self. I have some belongings, I have this much education, etc., etc. But most important of all these things is the mind in me. And to understand the importance of mind in me, we can give an analogy, we can give an example of a car and the driver. What is more important? It's the driver who controls where the car should go, how it should be driven, whether he drives it without collisions or with collisions. So mind is like that. All my physical possessions, my own body, or my objectives of life, my purpose of life, my achievements of life, they are all controlled by my mind. So when we talk of self, the pivotal in the self is my mind. And when we say that I have to think of self-development, the focal issue in this becomes development of mind. And this is what we are going to discuss today. Now, mind has certain nuances, or self has certain nuances. Okay. One observation that I hope all of you have and I also have is that, before we realize ourself, what is my mind? What is, the quote unquote self, which is me? Okay. It has already been molded before I realize this. What is the meaning of that? See, this is something which we have to really worry about. Because many a time I feel that we don't even live ourselves. When we are born, we have been already given a name and a religion. Okay. But then I have already been conditioned. Mind has been conditioned before I realize this. My economic status has been decided, and economic status is very important these days. And many a time, even my dreams have been defined by my parents. Many a time you will find that parents say, I want you to be a doctor, I want you to be an engineer, while the fellow may actually be wanting to be a photographer or a musician. So it's like, his talent is in music, his talent is in photography, which is gifted by nature to his mind, and that is his self. But he has been asked to become an engineer by his parents, and parents are supporting. So it's like fitting a small cone into a larger cone. We have already been fitted into some framework of mind. I think this is not a self-development, because our self has already been confined. Our self has already been defined in some sense. Not entirely, till we realize on our own later on that what is myself. Okay. Nature, for example, makes different types of trees. You have cashew trees, you have apple trees. Now nature has made cashew trees to produce cashews. If nature has given me talents of music, this is like my cashews if I am a cashew tree. And my parents want me to produce apples. I mean, it's like asking a cashew tree to produce apples. And then, we have conflicts in life, because we have certain expectations which have been imposed on us. Self is not being heard. I really didn't look into myself, into the deepest part of my mind, to find that what my mind wants, and I'm doing what the world wants, what my parents want. So I'm more like an animal in the circus, who has been trained from childhood that you behave like this if I make this music, and etc., etc. Okay, and I do that and get in return finances from my parents and everything else, rest of it, from the society. So in that case, what happens is we produce conflict within us. So realization of self is very important. And I can give you some examples, there is a fellow called Vinayak Lohani. He is a B.Tech from IIT Kharagpur, and then a very brilliant fellow. He got his MBA from IIM Kolkata, and then when he looked into himself, his mind, his self said that you have to help poor children. After having all these degrees of B.Tech and MBA from such acclaimed institutes of our country, he now runs an NGO called Parivar. You can actually Google it. And he picks up children from the street and he educates them. This is his self. Okay. And he excels in that. And he is extremely happy in that. So he, listening to his self and not sticking to the beaten path, okay, he devoted himself to his self, to the inner call. Okay. So where does it come from? Secondly, do we have a control on that? Can I develop that part of the mind which gives me the inner call? Of course, there are psychologists in this audience, and they are the masters of this field. I can only share with you what I experience. I am not a specialist in psychology. Rather, I had formal education and my research in physics, in material science. And tomorrow we will talk about lasers in material science. But this is something which is based on experience, and that gave me a drive to form an NGO called Epi-knowledge Foundation. It is based in Navi Mumbai, and we interact with distinguished, brilliant students such as you and faculty to see what good we can do for ourselves and for the society. This is our goal. And in this, the realization of self, and then self-development, and then awakening for self. These are important issues, and therefore we like to discuss this with you. One of them is brilliance. How bright the mind is. If you will find a distribution, if you talk of brilliance of mind, you will find a lot of people who, are not very brilliant, but on the other hand, there are people who are extremely brilliant, like, James Watt. You know his example. He was just watching a tea kettle, and steam was, making the lid to be lifted and dropped, and he realized that steam has the mechanical power. And this is how the steam engine was born. So this is an example of brilliance of mind, very brilliant mind. C.V. Raman, for example, the physicist from India, the Nobel Prize in 1930. Yeah? And we have to think, why didn't we get such, prize is something, but at least there should be knowledge generated of that level. Prize we may or may not get. Okay. Why our scientists, physicists like me could not generate knowledge of that level? Why didn't we apply, or why didn't we develop a brilliance of that level? But look at his brilliance. I mean, he was working as an accountant in an auditing company, and in the evening he would come and see the spectrum of sunlight passed through benzene, and he found that these lines are shifted. But he could visualize through his brilliance, okay, that this is an optical counterpart of that effect. And humanity got what we call as Raman effect. Now, Raman effect is, if you Google it, it is one of the most used effect after, or even one of the most used name, Raman, after angstrom. Angstrom is a unit, you know that. Okay, because it is so important in biology, in physics, in elucidating the nature of molecules, etc., etc. So brilliant people are the one who are the true leaders of the world. They gave us what we are today in terms of scientific and technological growth. And this is the question that we have to ask today: can we grow brilliance? Okay, or is it something which is already fixed by nature? It's a very important question for all of us. Okay, if we can grow, we must grow. Okay, because we need it. Our time needs people who are, brilliant and who can actually lead the humanity in terms of scientific truth, technological achievements, etc., etc., and rest of it. On the other hand, you will find large masses in our country, very trivial, very, not so brilliant, very dim kind of people. Okay, I would like to share a humorous story with you. It's just a joke. That once, a fellow, let us call him Mr. X, he was coming from the market, okay, after buying some fruits in his bag, and he meets his friend, let us call him Y, And this fellow says, Mr. Y, let me ask you some quiz today. I'm in a mood of conducting some quiz. Okay, but see how trivial, how ordinary kind of dim people these are. So he asks a question, as Mr. X asks a question to Mr. Y. If you tell me what is in my bag, I'll give you the orange from my bag to you. Okay. Then he says, if you tell me how many oranges are there, I'll give you all the 12 oranges. I mean, very trivial, very ordinary kind of thing. But look at the second fellow, the story doesn't end there. He says, wonderful question, but can you give me some clue? Y says to X. So you see, we are awash with such people around us. You know, so many minds, so many brains, but dealing with very trivial, very obvious things. It is not brilliance. So then the question comes, can we transform our minds? Can we develop ourselves, or our self is fixed? As I said, you know, self is like the deepest part of my mind, and mind has the power to, or one of the functions, or one of the abilities to make decisions. And when I apply this decision to develop my mind, okay, I should ask myself a question, can I actually do that? Or is my deepest part of mind, sometimes you will find, if you have experienced, that, you know, deepest part of mind, which some people call as unconscious mind, am I right? Unconscious mind, which does not process, is a processing mind, which conscious mind, then a subconscious mind, which is, you know, memory, where your experiences, your knowledge, are stored, and the deepest part, the unconscious mind, which I really don't know, I am not in that field, but I can experience that there is something very deep in myself, and that, you know, it kind of guides in different circumstances. Okay, it guides me, do this, you know, as if instruction comes from deep within. And this deep within is so adamant, sometimes my conscious mind does not want to follow it, because I feel deep mind is mischievous. Sometimes it is not positive, sometimes it is negative. It has, you know, negative traits like greed, anger, very common, you know, or you know, lack of love and compassion for others. Okay, so these negative traits are there. Honestly speaking, they are there, and this deepest part of the mind, which people may call as unconscious mind or soul, scientifically, to the best of my knowledge, there is not much knowledge about the entity called soul, although in Buddhism they say that soul is you know, something which can exist even without a body, and it can, you know, transform from one body to another in the form of reincarnation. I don't know that, and to my best of my knowledge, there is no scientific evidence to this, but they have some you know, arguments to prove that no, this is actually there, because sometimes they find you know, some children, they talk of a language which they never heard. I don't recall what it is called, but there is some term for it. Okay, or sometimes they remember things which they remember places which they never saw, and they are correct. How does it happen? I don't know. Or is there some energy which, you know, is in the form of a soul, and it leaves and body is dead, living body becomes a dead body? Okay, is death an event, or is it a process? So these are, actually speaking, research problems. You know, I also visit Germany very often as a Humboldt fellow. Every year I teach at University of Bochum, for example. So when I share this interest with my German colleagues, they say, oh yes, there is a research going on, let us go to that university. And sometimes I visit, but it is in a very rudimentary, very naive stage, and they say it may be there, may not be there, but it is not very clearly known scientifically that there is an entity called soul. And does it soul, is that the real self? Okay. And is it that entity, unconscious mind, which gives the instructions from within? And sometimes it does not give nice instructions. It does not give positive instructions. So the question is, can we change it? Let us see it as a seeker, not as an expert or not as a masters of these fields. There may be masters, I am not that. Okay, let us see whether we can change it from our experiences or from our information about what others have achieved. Okay, so what I feel is that when we talk of self-development and when we talk of that deepest mind, okay, one thing I can tell you for sure based on my experience, that even this deepest part of the mind, when it gives you a kind of negative command, conscious mind can actually say no to that. Of course, there is conflict within me, and sometimes conflict is so much that I even have psychosomatic effects. I have sweating, I have palpitation, but I don't agree with my deepest part of the mind. And I become, my conscious mind says, no, I will not follow it, let anything happen, I don't care for it. And then I overpower it. And then if you keep on doing, you find that, that trait of the deepest mind is slowly suppressing. It's slowly suppressed. And sometimes it becomes silent, as if that negative trait is dead now. Okay. Now, in terms of physical world, there are many examples, and they are real examples. I mean, you can find it, you can see it yourself. You don't need to know the science behind that. This is just an experience. It's plausible. It's phenomenological. That through the attributes such as, determination, willpower, I can develop myself. Okay. Here I would like to give an example. I don't know if you have heard of a lady called Wilma Rudolph. Wilma Rudolph is a story which really inspired me, and I like to. And this is not a unique story. In fact, later on, I found there are 11 such stories related to Olympic players, Olympic athletes. So they are the best in the world in their field. Okay. Now, Wilma Rudolph, she was born in 1940. Okay. And at a very tender age of 4, she had an infantile paralysis due to polio. Okay, she had polio and her legs are, paralyzed. In fact, her one of the legs, left leg, was paralyzed, and she had to wear braces to even walk. And doctor said that now onwards you will never be able to walk. But her mother said she will walk. And they worked so hard. Of course, it's a physical thing. It's not a change in the soul or the deepest part of the self which we are talking about. Okay. And they were doing massage, day and night, and, all the attention was focused on to this young girl. And by the age of 12, she was actually one of the members of her basketball team in University of Tennessee. Okay. And in 1960, she won 3 gold medals in Olympics in sprint. Imagine, a lady who had paralytic attack, legs were paralyzed, she was walking with the help of braces, becomes the fastest woman on earth. This is no miracle. This is her determination, her mother's determination, and practice for it. Practice, practice, practice. As we say in practice makes a person perfect. Okay, and perfection has no upper limit, you know. So in self-development, this is something very important. It's very inspiring. You know, if a lady who had paralytic attack can win 3 gold medals in 100 meter, 200 meter, and 4 in 200 meter relay race, okay, I mean, everything is possible. But let us talk of everything possible in positive sense. Let us not think of negative things. Okay, those are also possible. You know, nature is full of everything. Nature, you will find, has creative powers, and it also has destructive powers. It has life, it gives birth, it also gives you death. So nature is full of everything. Okay, it gives rains for the agriculture, which gives us life, but it also gives tornadoes, it also gives tsunamis. Okay, nature gives, you know, air to breathe. Now, breathing gives life, but the same breathing also produces, you know, certain radicals, and they are responsible for aging. So the same process of breathing, which is necessary for living, is also responsible for aging and death. Okay, so nature is full of everything. But mind, you know, we have to think only when we say development of mind. We have to think only in terms of positive development. Okay, when we say I want to develop myself, I essentially mean that making a transition from negative traits to positive traits. Okay, and that will be my self-development. Development will not say if a person is developing as a terrorist. Will not say this is a development. This is a degradation. Okay, development means good for myself, good for others, good for the society. I generate joy, happiness for myself, and I also generate joy and happiness for others. That is development. And we talk only of that. And the good news is that even that deepest part of mind, even our physical limitations can be overcome by self-development. Okay. So now the final question, that how do we develop this self? Now we know that self is nothing but mainly my mind. This is what drives my body, my physical health, my mental abilities, my physical abilities. Okay, and mind can be changed. Even I have seen, you know, over a period that students who were not very brilliant to begin with, but through practice, through willpower, through perseverance, okay, brilliance could be groomed. They became very intelligent, very brilliant. Okay, to begin with, I've seen certain students who had been memorizing subjects, but through proper training, through you know, proper guidance and perseverance and willpower, they could develop their faculty of thinking, for example, or imagination. Thinking, imagination, these are very important faculties of our mind, and they can be grown. Okay, so self can be developed, and when we make a transition from our limitations, our negative traits, to positive trait, we call it a development of self. Okay, the deepest part of the mind which guides us, and in combination with subconscious mind and conscious mind. After all, we can't separate it, that, we cannot compartmentalize that, this is how the unconscious mind works. They are all working together like a single machine, okay, in harmony with each other. Yes, am I right? Yeah. So this harmonious, coordinated approach of working together of all these parts of mind, okay, when transformed from, let us say, negative traits to positive traits, or from lower traits to higher traits. Someone may say, I don't have negative traits at all, so why I need to develop myself? Okay, sometimes even students may say, we have been given standard syllabus, we have to learn it, we have to produce, good marks for ourselves in our mark sheets, and that is our development. Okay, but that's not true. You know, if a student is already, let us say, close to 90% or 85%, I mean, perfection has no upper limit. He can be even more brilliant, more scientific, more technological, more innovative, and perfection has no upper limit. Okay, so growth in the level or transition from negative traits to positive traits is what we call as self-development. And self-development, the good news is that can be done by the mind itself. You know, mind develops mind. You don't have to go outside. There is you know, my experience says so that one of the best thing which nature has given us is my own guru within me. In the today's era of you know, these fake gurus and all that, it is always good to have a guru within ourselves. Okay, another good advantage is that wherever I go, my guru also goes with me, if it is within me. Okay, so growing that guru within you which guides us, this is a capability of nature. It's very scientific according to me, because I can experience it myself. If you grow this capability of guiding yourself in the circumstances of adversities, for example, or sufferings. Okay, many a time, you know, in student life, life is not so simple these days, and we do have you know, negativities in our life, anger, sometimes frustration, depression. Okay, but I tell you, for all negativities there is a positivity, and all negativities can be transformed into positivity. There are methods for it. Okay, and that when we do, we call it awakening. Okay, so this is the final question now. What is awakening? After all, awakening means not just awareness. See, awareness is like an information. I know that how I transform my negative traits into positive traits. But that is not awakening. Awakening is the next step. Can I apply that information, or can I apply my knowledge to actually achieve that? Okay, you know, recently I was listening to a talk by Arun Shourie. Arun Shourie, many of you may be knowing, very intelligent you know, journalist, turned into politician. He was giving a talk somewhere in Mumbai, and he gave a very nice example, you know, difference between awareness and awakening. Okay, see, he said that you know, recently there was a standoff between India and China at Doklam in Bhutan, and then all these statistics surfaced that you know, China has already constructed all the roads to the strategic points on the border of India and China, which is mainly Himalayas. Okay, it's a very long border of some 4,500 kilometers. And in Vajpayee government, there was a foreign secretary in the by the name of Shyam Saran. He was also a trekker, you know, and he you know, identified 73 places in the Himalayan terrain where the supply must reach through roads, so that in case of war we should not lose it. Okay, so he did this exercise, and this you know, awareness was generated that there are 73 strategic locations where Government of India must construct roads so that supply can reach there. You see, India has constructed, as per this information in the news reports, only some 22 roads where the requirement is for 73. Okay, and this too was done only very recently. So you see, awareness is there. Government of India knows that there are 73 locations, but they didn't construct it, so they are not awakened. Okay, this is the difference between awareness and awakening. When we know that I can develop myself, my mind, to produce goodness for myself and for others, but I don't apply it, it is like sleeping, you know. And you know, In sleep, someone is pretending that I am sleeping, but actually he is awake from within. That is even worse. Okay, you can never awaken such a person who pretends to be, sleeping, but actually he is woken up. Okay, so you have to be I have to be true to myself. That is first prerequisite. And secondly, I have to have a plan to actually implement my knowledge or information for self-development, and that we would call as awakening. How do we do that? The final question of today's discussion. How do we awaken ourselves for self-development? We defined self is our mind. It can be developed. It can be developed for positive goals. We can be great for our society, for ourselves. We can generate happiness, technology, science. Our country has one of the biggest problem as poverty. Okay, can we feed them? Can we good them? Can we give them a meal which is satisfying to them? Okay, 1/3 of our population does not sleep with proper meals in their stomach. Okay, can we do that? Okay, of course there was a green revolution, you know that. So this is through, the leadership through intelligence, through brilliance. Professor Swaminathan, he genetically modified the grains, and then masses could be saved, and there is nothing like the great Bengal famine again. Okay, of course there is malnutrition in our country. Can we make nutritional food? So these are real issues for our country, for our society, and we, the people who are in science and technology, have that responsibility to develop ourselves, to develop our mind, our abilities, awaken to that, and then produce what is good for our society and good for ourselves. So this final question, how do I awaken? This is, I was thinking, this is a very, very complex thing to awaken myself. But few things I can share with you as my experience. I have a feeling that awakening is case-to-case basis. It also depends awakening for what. If you want to awaken to become an athlete, the course of actions is different. If you want to awaken to develop yourself as a scientist, strategy is different. And if you want to awaken to overcome your psychological traits like anger, negative psychological traits, then the plan of action is different. So it's very much dependent on that, and one has to, as I experienced and as I feel, that one has to really ponder over it, think over it. Now I can share one example. One of the negative psychological trait which I had, it's not fully gone yet, is anger. In some circumstances, even when I was working in Department of Atomic Energy, some circumstances made me angry. It's a fact. I used to get angry. But after that, I realized that anger was actually harmful to handle that situation. I could have handled that situation much better without anger. If I had taken that anger out, okay, situation would have been much better. Anger damaged it. So then I thought, so what should be the strategy to get rid of anger? This was, the way of developing the self, okay, to achieve a goal of getting rid of anger. Okay. One thing I realized, anger is a psychological trait which has a rate of growth which is very fast. It's like a atishbaji or a fire, or So there, the time is not enough for the mind or the good part of the mind to think and control it. Okay. In fact, I was also giving a talk in Kerala, and one student asked me that, see, it is fine, it is nice to say it, control your anger. I also know it. There's nothing new in that. But you tell me how to control it. Okay, when it comes, I can't control it. Okay, I know it, that it is important to control and it must be controlled, but I can't control it. Now can you tell me how to control it? I said, yeah, I have an experience and I would like to share that with you. So when I observe that anger has a rate of growth, it grows from state 0 to let us say level 1 in this digital world, zeros and 1, okay, then the time span between 0 and 1 is so short that the mind actually does not work, or it cannot control that. It's like, you want firefighting to be done when there is a fire, so firefighting system has to be in place before the fire takes place. You can't, in Hindi there is a saying that, आग लगने पे कुआं खोदना. Okay, आग लगी और आप कुआं खोद रहे हैं, तो जल जाएगा पूरा घर. Okay, उस समय कुआं थोड़ी खोदा जाता है. You have to have the firefighting system before the fire occurs. Okay, this is a basic principle. And this stimulated me to, oh yes, anger is like fire. And I have to control it like firefighting. Okay, of course it will initiate because our mind is so hardwired, and there is a lot of research going on. In fact, Dalai Lama has written a very nice book, Art of Happiness, and one American psychologist has co-authored. I don't remember his name, but if someone is interested, you can please send me an email and I can give you the details of that book. And he has even conducted very scientific experiments. He agrees that, our deepest part of the mind is hardwired. It is very stubborn. You have to agree with that, or you will have a conflict within you and you will have sufferings within you if you don't agree with your deepest part of the mind. But sometimes I find my deepest part of the mind is not positive. Anger, for example. It's not a positive trait. So when anger strikes, okay, you can't control it. But if you have a strategy in place before it strikes, that works. And how it does it? I call it default settings. Like, when we buy a mobile, the first thing we do is, we set which, ringtone I will have, how much volume I will have, what should be the screen saver, isn't it? So this is what we do on our smartphones. So we have to have which we call as default settings. Now the same thing for anger or controlling these negative traits, I must have default settings, and that is, a firefighting system in place before the fire occurs. Okay, so before the anger strikes, I have made a strategy that whatever may happen, first thing is I'll keep quiet. Okay, this is my default setting. Okay, now default setting you can't do when anger has already arrived. Okay, you can't do any at that time because the rate is very rapid. I'll not speak at that moment, and it works. Okay, you don't speak and just give yourself maybe not more than half minute. I tell you, I have seen it, and this time is now reducing. Okay, over the time, maybe earlier it was 5 minutes. 5 minutes I'm wrestling with myself, but I defeated that part of the mind. I will be silent, whatever you may do. I will not talk when I am angry. Okay, and then, this is a very scientific observation that now this time is reducing. Okay, half a minute if you are silent, suddenly I find that positive traits have started sprouting. Suddenly I ask myself, why this fellow is angry? Okay, he misbehaved with me. Then I found, oh, he is suffering. He is suffering because of some problems. Okay, so maybe his suffering is more than my suffering. So I have to be compassionate to him. Okay, I should not be angry. Anger with anger is like, he takes my eyes out and I take his eye out and both of us are blind. It's not a good idea. Okay, so silence as a default setting has helped, and in that silent period, I experience that positive traits are surfacing, and I start becoming compassionate to him. And finally, sometimes he hugs me, or if it's a small fellow, he sometimes even touches my feet. I find wonderful. I mean, I found a solution of controlling anger, which has generated a lot of happiness for myself, my family members, my colleagues, my friends, and even strangers. Okay, Many times you will find strangers doing very strange things which induce anger. Okay. But if you have this default setting, it works. So you see, this is what I call as awakening. Okay. Awakening to control one negative psychological trait. Okay. Through this default setting. Now this is a strategy, and I have to apply it with a very strong willpower. I have to wrestle with myself. I have to defeat that negative part of my mind. So there is a bhidant within my mind, as if the two minds are fighting with each other, and this positive mind has to finally win. But once you win it, the rewards are fantastic. I can share it with you. Okay? So this is only just one of the examples of how to awaken for development of self. Okay? No external guru is necessary. You have to only think. Of course, sometimes I have to discuss with my friends, my colleagues. So this is what I would like to tell as my experience. And thank you very much. I would like to stop here. Thank you very much.